Good morning, maybe good afternoon, more technically speaking, as I am the latest presentation before your lunch. So if you want to bear with me with the next 25 to 30 minutes, I'd like to drive you through of how to better handle self-injection of biologics, taking the position on 2 feet, 2 technical considerations. First one from the patient's point of view. So let's put our foot into the patient's shoe. So self-injection, every day, weekly, maybe not such a pleasant experience. So we'll try to see how basically to make this experience better. Our second foot, let's say the right foot, is like putting our feet into the formulation itself and having biologics, fragile formulation. We have a nice talk this morning of how sensitive are biologics to an injectable is a process basically which is hard for the formulations themselves. So we will consider how to optimize the drug delivery itself. Considering these 2 feet, I will just talk from where I'm working from. So I'm from a device manufacturing and development company, NEMERA. So for the ones which are not familiar with NEMERA, we have 4 manufacturing sites, and every day 5 million diabetics people are using insulin pens coming out of our factory. 10 million asthmatics people every day are using asthma inhalers that we produce. So let's took a little step back now. So everyone is, even if we are not biologists, all of us in this room today are familiar with this schematic representation of an immunoglobulin and an antibody, but I don't know if some of you know when was the first antibody discovered? Question to the audience, do we have any historical specialist here of the science? Okay. So I will try to give you the answer here. So it's 1890, the answer. So the discovery of the first antibody neutralizing agent was made in 1890 at the time by 2 gentlemen. So Emil von Behring and Mr. Shibasabulo, who just discovered that taking the serum from immunized horses, immunized animals, and just putting them to horses with diphtheria was curing them. So these neutralizing agents, first of them, was the first antibody of this world. So these 2 first gentlemen were the first immunobiologists of this world, and they were recognized with the very first Nobel Prize in medicine. So that's taking you back a bit in the landscape, but a long time ago. So in the first part of my presentation, I will just give you a bit of the background, maybe not getting back to the 1890s landscape. And second part, I will zoom into innovation. And the final part of my presentation, I will just give you an example of a self-injection case study, giving again this example of how to better handle the patient and the formulation itself. So let's deep dive into what is today transforming our landscape. So I put on this slide here 8 big tendencies, 8 trends of the industry which are reshaping our industry. So we talk here about biologics. So we've seen the first biologics being this antibody being discovered here is definitely reshaping our industry. We will come into the details later. And they also probably also influence the cost of in the industry. So biologics are expensive, and the cost keeps really increasing in our industry. So it's an increase, like a yearly spend for the US is around $10,000. It's lesser in Europe, but it keeps increasing every day. So the growth in US of the annual healthcare spend are nearly just 7%, whereas in Europe it's around 2.5% of still healthcare spend increase every year. So not only US and Europe, but also here the emerging markets are just now, accessing, where should I point? So the emerging markets are also more accessing to the healthcare condition, and really just now the population, also the aging population is obviously another massive tendency that we have. We live much longer. population is aging, but we live less healthy. So average used to be around 63 years that we live healthy in our world, and amazingly enough, but it's decreasing. So this last year was like 62 years that we average live in healthy condition. So we have more and more chronic conditions, and also multiple chronic conditions. So therefore, the fact of like to be able to cure people, just having drugs to cure people in a way that is cheaper for the industry, so people to self-inject, drives us to really just having combination drug products, and how it's important to link the formulation delivery to a device that the population is able to handle itself. And last but not least, the arrival of electronic devices in our industries. There was some very nice insight, and thank you, Simon, for that this morning, about this arrival of electronics in our world. It's key, and also the fact that the consumer are become much more and more influent. People know, and I really like the sentence that you say, like, you're sick, where do you go? You go to the internet. So that's a really striking sentence, and I really think this is true. So let's deep dive in why biologics are just a big game changer today. So 50% of the healthcare just now are biologics by 2020. So keep increasing. Just about 27% represent 20% of the OTC and RX deliveries. And why does it really reshaping the way we think of formulation? Obviously, oral pills, we don't need device to take these pills, whereas biologics, we need a way basically to administer it, and today the way of delivering it is mostly injectable devices. So for that, we really need to increase the collaboration between the pharma company and the device-making companies. The pharma companies themselves are also evolving. So like we could see in the past, in a few years back, that the tendency was really just like to become as big as possible, whereas now it's becoming more obvious that the pharma industry are become more performant when they are leader of their category. So being leader of the category, being leader either in the disease area, as a generic company, for example, as well, but also if they are very much focused into what they are doing in terms of portfolio. So you can see here the performance of the pharmaceutical company are drastically higher when they are having less than 6 subscale categories, so they are much more focused. And it's really just the performance, but it's also the innovation, the commercial strengths, and the profitability itself of the pharma company, which are really linked to these category leaderships. So they really can spend more efficiently their G&A here. They have a higher chance of success in development, so 27% greater chance of success in phase 3, that's a lot, and also an improved launch of new products. We talk here about 36% increase of peak sales when they are just a focused company. So that's a pretty interesting fact, and that's out of a Bain study that I found to share. So that's also like reshaping the way the industry is made. So this taking into account, just next get back to our story about combination drug products. So device manufacturers are now recognized as a device expertise, whereas pharma companies are having the formulation expertise. And we can really see here that whereas the vertical integration used to be really just try to integrate a few years ago, now just pharma companies also like coming more and more to device manufacturer in terms of collaboration. So what's being put in place is really a mode of collaboration and basically mirror the teams to work together, having program manager in front of program manager, regulatory expert to work together, and that's become more like the way of working in the industry, just towards the success of finding this combination drug product together. So the expertise of designing a device is really important, and because we need to take in consideration a lot of user consideration in the background. So who is the final user? Is it going to be the patient himself? Is he a male? Is he a female? Is it aged person? Is it a young adult? Is it a child? Does he have some specific impairment diseases that prevent him just to hold his device in a way that we would use it in a development team? Would he be different really using it? So that all the user consideration. But also, is the final user being a professional or somebody, a helper at home, an untrained person, but who will administer the drug, a husband, a wife, a parent, just administers the drug. So really considering all the possible different type of users. And then the environment is also key to consider when we're considering developing a device. Would the environment be a home care setting? Would it be like in a quiet environment when we see all this nice instruction for use, where we need to have a large table, all clean, put all the sheets everywhere, all around, and just being really nice and quiet, wait when it comes out of the fridge? Or will we need to administer when on a rush, when we're traveling, so we'll need to carry things? So really we need to consider what is exactly happening in the patient life. And the same thing, when it's not the patient himself we need to inject, is it in a hospital setting? Is it at home? And is it on the bedside in a quiet environment? Or is it in an emergency situation? So emergency here at hospital, but also in case of anaphylactic shock, anywhere that can happen, and who would administer. So that's really the consideration that we need to have in mind just by having a development of a combination drug product. A few numbers here that just to give you a background that also struck me here, is that 99% of disease management is in the hands of individuals and their family. 99%, that's a huge, really huge number. Another one which just came in my mind again is like more than 50% today of the world people lives with a chronic disease. So 1 out of 2 here just like are just having need to have a chronic disease to treat potentially. And by 2020, that represents 81 million Americans would have multiple chronic diseases to treat. So potentially several injections, several medications to take in the same time. Last but not least, we are all getting older, and being like just below 1 billion of people just over 60 years old in 2015, we will be just above 2 billion in 40 years' time. So all of this is impacting obviously the disease and impacting also the population we use the formulation and injection itself. But not only. We also have a changing environment, and here the data, there's a very huge increase of data. We talk here about 180% increase of capacity of data, 50 million connected devices by 2020, a huge also investments in venture capital, early stage private equity, which are coming in this area. And again, 90% of the patients would trust social media for health-related information. So once again, they are the doctors. They are the first one who will go to the social media. So really all of that is reshaping our world, reshaping it very quickly. And as an industry, we just really need to move and move fast. So what do we see on the radar of innovation? So talking about electronics of medical devices here, we just try to count, it's a little simple count of number of electronic activities that we've seen in the medical device area. So moving back from the very just like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, like 1 or 2 announcements of connected device here. But we see here in last year, there was basically a lot in inhalation area. So basically how to improve in the PMDI area, how to improve the coordination of asthma inhalers by PMDI's treatment for the patient. So better usage, and that's how medical devices could help. Parenteral as well is a second area where we see a lot of movement. So electronic activity among device manufacturers, prototyping, lots of collaboration and also integration of different companies as well coming. So moving for the device manufacturer, but move as well for the pharma companies with some newcomers on the industry. So the industry is also reshaping with the entry of newcomers of the industry. Some names that were not just visible in this type of show just a few years ago. So just Lilly with the companion medical, for example. We see Propeller Health being also pretty active here with Boehringer, with Glaxo. That's this kind of example. So what is electronic doing in medical devices? So we tried here to sequence it in 3 phases. So first of all, electronic could improve the delivery as an engine itself of the medical devices. So being here to improve, for example, the delivery of high viscous drug by heating the system, this is one example, doing some more accuracy, some more patient comfort, so really playing on the engine, the mode of delivery itself. So that's one type. The second type is bringing some connectivity to the patient interface. So between the device and the patient, the one-to-one, having reminders, having dose counting, having some on-screen administration instructions. So you can have, for example, your IFU being displayed on your screen. Just something between the user and the device itself. And the later stage, the way we see it, is really just bringing the big data, bringing the connected devices with data recording, data collection, and potentially after that moving back to the payment by results instead of payment by act, eventually in a few years, and probably starting with the US by that time. So it's happening, it's moving, there's possibility, and once again, we need to define what's electronic devices means at a different possibility here. Talking back and getting back to the previous discussion we have about prefilled syringes, as well, we see like prefilled syringes keeps increasing here. So we're talking about nearly 6 million if in 2018, moving around the 10 million prefilled syringes, prefilled syringes being here by 2024. So the growth of prefilled syringes to reduce any errors of administration to help the user, it keeps growing and huge. And automatic devices surrounding auto-injector are coming. They are very small yet. That's a red part of the graph here. But they're coming and they're developing fast at the pace around 15% of growth. So that would help also the shift of the final user moving from the hospital initially just to the home care setting, to the home care environment, which is a tendency we will just definitely will not go back. Again, reduction of healthcare costs and empowering the people as well to treat themselves on a long-term basis and more independently. So what does that mean? Having auto-injector developing and having biologics also increasing. We have, in terms of biologics, we have drug viscosity, which is increasing, and we also have drug quantity, which is increasing. So the auto-injector technology basically needs to move, to develop, to follow these constraints given by the formulation itself. So in a two ways, that's a possibility just to either moving to what we call high viscosity auto-injector or to a technology which is called the bolus injector, just to be able to administer a larger quantity over a longer period of time. So that's really the way of like being able to expand the delivery ways. So what could that mean in terms of prediction of number of development of automatic injection? So really see the highest growing rate coming from the standard auto-injector here, keeps growing at a very high rate of increase of devices. But obviously the auto-injector for high viscosity, for biologics, will grow faster. We see here, if you go around the show, you will see different type of technology trying to push to higher possibility of delivery of higher viscous products, biologics, and also a lot of activity moving to just different type of wearable injector, bolus injector, the way you call it. So the industry is moving fast, Not all of them are validated on the market, but some already are. So let's now take a case study about self-injection. So I call it the 4x4 challenge of our industry, the challenge of formulation and the challenge based of patient. So formulation, we just mentioned that, are becoming in a larger volumes to deliver. So here we are moving to just in prefilled syringe, basically 1 ml prefilled syringes to a 2.225 ml delivery, so larger volume to administer. That's obviously one constraint, to administer automatically larger volumes. And these volumes are getting more and more viscous. So high viscosity used to mean above 5, above 10, above 30 centipoise. And now we have formulation which are sustained release formulation. We could be in a range of above 80, above 100 centipoise to administer. Obviously, it's for the benefit of patient. Sustained release means less injection for the patient. Instead of having weekly injections, they can have bi-monthly injection, for example. But then the products tends to be more viscous. And the primary containers, most of them remain fragile, remains brittle. They are just still mostly in glass, even if we see there's more and more COC syringe developing. But we have to take in consideration the primary container remains mostly glass. So how do we really do that? And obviously formulation, we said it before, more complex formulation, fragile formulation, and that we need to respect, especially the 3D dimension of the molecule, to respect the biological activity of the molecules. So that's really the 4 constraints that we have to respect by delivery by auto-injector. Then the patient. So obviously caring about the patient perception, that's key. Not to have just something which is hurting, which is that patients won't want to be adherent if they have to just be fearing their injection on a weekly basis or even on a daily basis. I'm not sure the adherence would be at its best. So caring is really key. But also robust. Sorry about the picture. A device that is robust. We've seen some nice simulation here about a drop test, but this is really key. The device are transported prior to the syringe insertion, but also transported to the patient and then transported by the patient. They may have a risk of being dropped. They may have a risk of breakage. So it's really key just to have just a high resistance of the devices themselves. Then the patients. It's not one patient. We'll see that before. There's multiple of patients. Different type of condition, multiple conditions to take into consideration. So really just things to consider is who is your patient. And then try to make things simple. Patients, we talk here about 1, 2, and potentially 3, because for auto-injector, as you know, a 2 steps automatic injection is basically you remove the cap, you don't see the needle, you press onto your injection site. Simple 2 steps, you have automatic needle penetration into the body, then you have automatic delivery, and then you have automatic return to safety position. That's the 2 steps. 3 steps is when you have a button. Sometimes patients prefer, but sometimes patients are unable to do this push button because they have impairment into their hands, impairment into their thumbs, if you're talking about RA patients. So really trying to simplify the number of steps for the user to reduce any possible misuse is also key. So that's what I call the 4x4 challenge, so for the formulation and for the patient himself. So here I just wanted to take this Cephalia case study. So it's 2 platforms. One is for 1 ml and one is for 2.25 ml delivery. And this is their mechanical auto-injector. So it's 2 steps. So one, again, the first step, remove the cap. Second step, simply press onto the injection site. But how these simple 2 steps can be tailored to have really just specific care about delivery formulations of specific biologic formulation which are fragile. So this is based on a mechanical innovation here. This is called a mechanical control through a cam system, so which allow basically to have different benefits. So let's go through them. So first, you can really disconnect two things, which are first, the needle penetration at the right depth. So if you have an auto-injector which is tailored for sub-Q delivery, you would go to the sub-Q layer of your body. If you go to IM, you would go to insertion of your needle into the intramuscular layer of delivery. But you will disconnect, by design, the needle penetration to the injection itself. You won't just do the two in the same time. That's what usual auto-injector do. But in terms of precision, that is also much better to respect the right delivery layer of your formulation. Then this specific cam system allows to control two things. It allows to control, is based on a spring. The engine is a compressed spring, but it allows to control when the spring is released. You don't have, the dart effect when the needle is thrown into the patient and potentially hurts the patient. You can really control the advancement speed of your needle into the patient. That's one thing. And then you also respect the initial peak flow when the rubber stopper is initially moved by the compressed spring. You avoid this basically initial peak flow that you usually have into auto-injector, thanks to this cam system again, just to have a smooth delivery of the formulation and avoid the potential bruising of your tissue when they need to expand super fast at the beginning. So that's what it does as well. So that allows a lot of flexibility in terms of design. You can, depending on your time of injection, so usually the golden standard of the industry is basically to try to keep the injection below 10 seconds. So let's say an injection in 8 seconds. You have to adjust depending on your needle size. So obviously, if you consider the patient pain, trying to have the thinner needle is the better. So trying to go to a 27, 29 needle gauge is important. And then you would adjust your spring force to be able to respect your injection time, depending on your needle gauge and depending on your viscosity of your formulation that you have to do. And also the specific patent around this auto-injector allow us to tailor by design the entire force applied during the injection course itself. Meaning you can slow down the beginning of injection mechanically, just for the beginning, just to let the body tissue expand when the formulation is injected. Inject then faster, and then toward the end of injection, you can imagine just like having a specific back curve here to slow down the end of injection. So it's kind of a damper system, mechanical damper system, that allows you just before retraction to let the body tissue absorb the formulation before the retraction. So it avoids you just to inject fast and then automatically retract, or have the viability potentially of a silicone-based damper that we all know that can be sensitive to the temperature, for example. Here it's much more robust in terms of the timing that you can control, because this is mechanical. So after that, you have automatic needle retraction. So the user never sees the needle, so it doesn't see the needle prior to injection, doesn't see it after injection. So that's also very important. We talked about it in the previous speech, not to have any needle stick, obviously, injuries, contamination potentially. So it's moving back into a secure position, ready to be disposed. And obviously, being able to respect the formulation is key to be able to have a wider range of formulation, even the most fragile, administered by auto-injector at home. So really pleased to have received yesterday at Pharmapack the award of innovation for this auto-injector. So what is key here is just the ability to mechanically tailor the course of injection. We see that innovation is everywhere. This is an idea that some people are taking from the electronic point of view as well, to tailor the force applied during the injection through a mechanical or an electronical engine could be also a different way to do it. And that's what is interesting in our industry, is that innovation never stops. It's a journey that we're all just taking just for the benefit of the patient. And that's why it is very important to keep going. So Cephalia is one example of the innovation. More to come. Putting also some electronic features on Cephalia is further down the road. So keep posted with us, and thank you very much for your attention.